Today's guest on the Next is Steve Krouse, founder of Val Town. Val Town is a platform aimed at making programming more accessible and collaborative, particularly through web-based tools. Steve discusses the genesis of Val Town, the challenges of traditional code collaboration, and how Val Town aims to make code more portable and easier to run in different environments. He also delves into the integration of AI tools into Val Town and shares insights on their growth strategy, which focuses on interoperability and openness rather than directly competing with existing AI code generation tools. Steve emphasizes the potential long-term impact of Val Town and how it aims to democratize programming, allowing both professional developers and newcomers to build and share code seamlessly. The discussion also touches on the broader implications of AI in coding, the importance of democratizing access to programming, and fostering better collaboration within the tech community. This is a great one, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we get started, I'm Jason Jacobs, and this is the Next. It's not really a show, it's more of a learning journey to explore how founders can build ambitious companies while being present for family and not compromising flexibility and control, and also how emerging AI tools can assist with that. Each week, we bring on guests who are at the tip of the spear on redefining how ambitious companies get built, and selfishly, the goal is for this to help me better understand how to do that myself, while bringing all of you along for the ride. Not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. Okay, Steve Krouse, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm psyched for this one. We met because I was tweeting about the frustrations that I was having as I was attempting to break the ice and hack with some AI coding using Replit. And for anyone that hasn't listened to me before, I am the opposite of an engineer. And you slid in my DMs and said, one, I've been following you for a while, back to MCJ. And two, I happen to be founder of this company that might be able to help you. And we spent a little bit of time exploring that. And ultimately, no knock on Val Town, or it's offering more of a timing thing. I was like, this is too much brain damage right now. And I just set and forget with Squarespace. And I was just trying to get a basic website set up. And it was like, it wasn't strategic for me. I just needed it done. And so I just went with the far most cookie cutter version. But that doesn't mean I'm done with coding with AI. It just means at that moment in time. But at any rate, there's a lot of ground that I'm looking forward to covering with you on that and a lot of other things. And I'm super grateful that you're making the time to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I guess obliquely I was following you before MCJ because I have been a Runkeeper user for so long, and I still use it. And then I found MCJ and thought it was awesome. I listened to it like all the episodes, like at the time when you only had like 20.
I was going to say, because all the episodes is like many hundreds, so that would really be a lot of episodes.
Yeah, I tapped out at 10 or 20 or 30 episodes. It's amazing you kept it going for so long. But yeah, it's such an honor to be invited on your new podcast. Thank you.
And if I remember right, Steve, you were kicking around at doing something in climate at the time, which is why you were tuning into MCJ. And so you didn't just tap out of MCJ, but you ended up tapping out of working in climate, right?
Yeah. My interest in working in climate never became all that serious. I forget. Like you, I found myself in between projects and was like wondering what to do next with my life. And climate was on top of the mind as like having a good impact on the world. And I remember telling my partner at the time, I vaguely want to be helpful in climate. I don't know what I should, like how I could even be helpful. I don't know anything about it. But if I interviewed this like people, experts in the space and made a podcast about it, I know that would educate me about the space and make me an expert. And she was like, that's a dumb idea. And for some reason, I was like, you know what? I bet this already exists. And immediately I found your podcast and you had come up with that exact same idea and we're pursuing it. And so you saved me a lot of time. I didn't have to go and get to people and talk to them. I could just listen to your conversations. So it gave me that education on the space of climate much faster than I wanted. And then to your point of me not like leaving climate, I left with a sense of optimism that like so many smart people were doing really amazing things in climate and that I didn't need to do climate. I could get back to the sort of stuff that more naturally excites me.
And the reality is, whether it's climate or anything else, nothing worthwhile comes easy or happens quickly. And therefore, if you want to do something worthwhile,
Mhm.
it needs to be a really good fit with your zone of excellence and delight. Otherwise, you're not going to
Yeah.
have the staying power to see it through. And so just having passion for the problem space, I would say, whether it's climate or anything else, is not enough.
So anyways, yeah, that's how I found MCJ. And I guess to give some more context, I had done that something similar to MCJ for the area that I was and still am super passionate about, which is programming. So I started a podcast called The Future of Coding, where I did what you did with MCJ. Basically, I went around interviewing experts about stuff and orienting myself in the field. And it has this wonderful knock-on effect of like, it all of a sudden makes you an expert in the field, or at least like people know your name now all of a sudden, which is very cool. It opens a lot of doors.
Why are you
So
giving
yeah.
away my secrets, Steve? And you're also, I was doing a little homework out ahead of this discussion, and I don't know what to make of you, because are you a dev tools guy? Are you a social network guy? Are you an AI guy? And I think you're going to say, I'm some combination of the three. But before I lead the horse, how do you think of yourself?
That's a good question. I feel like fundamentally I really identify with being a programmer. And then these days I really identify with being like a startup founder and CEO. I guess CEO is maybe a little too grandiose, but like the guy who's running the ship of a small startup. That's like my main identity.
My brother works at a big bank, and that's, yeah, he makes fun of us startup people all the time, because CEO, you can literally just incorporate something using like LegalZoom or something, and then order business cards from Vistaprint that say CEO, and you're CEO. Congrats, with no
There you go.
qualifications. So,
There you go.
yeah,
That's me.
and yeah, and so I mean, tell me how you found yourself in this seat as founder and CEO. And I guess I could ask that generally, but I'm also asking specifically about how Val Town came about.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like there's a long road that led to Val Town, but the
And
permit.
take us back as far, you choose how far back we start.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think for now I'll start 2.5 years ago,
Okay.
where I guess maybe I'll start like 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to start a dev tools company. It's like long been a dream of mine to start a company. I'm passionate about the dev tool space. I'm passionate about like the way that companies can make an impact on the world, like for positive, like in positive ways. And so I guess and I like saw some dev tool companies doing it, like Vercel or Retool or GitHub. I thought those companies were really changing the world for the better. And I wanted to start a company like them. And so I was like rooting around for startup ideas. And like I was prototyping in public and blogging about different startup ideas and trying some out. And one of those experiments ended. And I was like talking to friends and advisors and investors about what I should do next. And I struck up a friendship with one investor, Dan Levine, at Excel, and he and I cooked up the idea for what has become Val Town. And yeah, Val Town's about 2.5 years old now.
And what did you talk about?
What did Dan and I talk about?
Yeah, like you say, cooked up the idea. I'd love to I hate to use all these cliches, but I'd love to double click on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. I feel like that conversation, I have such a good memory of it. It was me and my co-founder of the last experiment at the time, and Dan Levine, sitting in South Park in San Francisco, like on one of those little benches where like all the VC firms are around. And I was like, Dan, do you have any startup ideas? I was like, I'm thinking about joining a startup. Do you have any ideas? He's like, no, you should start something. And sure, I have ideas. And he just started listing his ideas. And my former co-founder at the time, JP, he was like not interested in these ideas. In particular, the idea that became Val Town that I liked, he was like not at all into it. And so Dan and I were like trying to like concoct a company, and JP was like, no, that wouldn't work, or no, I don't like that part. So that was the actual tenor of the conversation. But yeah, Dan had this idea like in his back pocket, and he'd spent like, I don't know, 7 years trying to convince some idiot to start a company around this idea. And he finally found me to take him up on it. That's one way to pitch it. And the way I guess I can get, maybe this is what you were asking. The way he
What's
pitched
the idea?
the way he pitched it initially was, isn't it sad that there's code on the web that doesn't run, that you like code and documentation is just like dead code. Code in repos is just dead. If you want code to run, you have to do a bunch of stuff to get it to run. Yeah, there's this big disconnect. It's like there was Microsoft Word, but there was no, you needed Twitter to actually get people to put their thoughts out on the internet. Like there's no web native running code primitive. That's the thing that was Dan Levine's seed of the idea.
To use an analogy and caveat this entire discussion with the fact that I'm not a coder, but is it almost like social networks are for getting yourself and your ideas out there, and Val Town is about getting yourself and your code out there?
Yeah, that's not so far off. I think a lot about interfaces and like APIs. An API is like a kind of interface, and Twitter is a kind of interface, and like email is a kind of interface, and Facebook is a kind of interface. Like you can have friends, you can have likes, you can have posts. And when you like have a presence on one of these social networks, all of a sudden you've exposed a kind of interface to you as a person. And like people can DM you, like you just by being on Twitter and having your DMs open allowed me to DM you and start a conversation. And that's amazing and super empowering. But an average everyday person can't expose more programmatic interfaces. And that's maybe where Val Town would come in. You can make yourself a website like you did on Squarespace, and you can have an email address so people can email you. Those are interfaces, those are like ways into you. But if you truly wanted a programmatic interface for you, that's harder. And that's maybe more where Val Town would come in. I guess.
How do you define a programmatic interface? What is it?
Yeah. It's one of those slippery distinctions. I think this question might be easier to answer from a vibes perspective. Typically, a human interface would be one that has a UI. And so if it's on the web, that'd be HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And if it's on an app, it would be like a mobile app. That'd be a human interface. And then typically an API, a programmatic interface, would be like something that looks like JSON. It looks like data. Like a CSV could be more of a machine interface. And then I feel like an obvious question, maybe you're thinking, maybe not, is why would a human want one of these interfaces?
I'm also just thinking about what is the JSON or data or CSV. But before we talk, I do want to know why a human would want one of these interfaces. But first, I want to ask a precursor question, which is, what does an interface like that look like for humans? And then I want to know why they want it.
What does an interface like that look like for humans?
Yeah.
Do you want me to show an example of one of those interfaces, or just describe it? Because it's going to be more of a podcast.
I mean, you could show it, but the only thing is that this is going to be like some people might be audio only, so that they won't be able to see. But we are going to publish the video too.
Yeah. I think like the classic example of an API, just to give it make it concrete, would be like the weather. And so you could have a normal human interface to a weather, and that's a weather app, or like weather.com, that'll be a normal human interface. But I think weather.com, for example, also has an API version, which is like the other side of the coin. So you would go like api.weather.com/v1/weather and whatever. You type in the path or the Latin longitude, and then it will return the same weather results that you'd get as a human, but they're formatted, not pretty. There's no visuals. It's just text. It's formatted like a machine, more for a machine.
And how might one utilize that? And in what cases is that a better path than utilizing the weather application?
Yeah. So if you're using your human eyes, you want a normal UI. That's what UIs are for. If you're writing code to interact with an external system, it doesn't have human eyes. And so how is it supposed to parse out that it's 72 degrees now, and in an hour it's going to be 73 degrees? How is it supposed to parse out that information? And a naive implementation would be like, okay, why don't we load up the website, take a picture of it, and then have the computer do what a human would do and look around on the screen for that information? That's like one. But in reality, what you want that information structured in a way that's like very easy for you, the programmer in code, to navigate the information without having to think about color contrast and where on the page it is. You want to structure the information at the bare essentials so that, you can navigate it in code. Does that make sense?
It does. Now bring that back to where we started, which was that when Dan pitched the idea, he talked about how there's code on the web that doesn't run, that could be in documentation or in repositories. I guess tie those two together, since it sounds like they do go together, right?
Yes. Yeah, they do go together. APIs are like, basically there's this like underbelly of all the services we use that are only accessible to programmers. There's this like extra level of customization that only programmers can use. Like the normal human gets like, they're called apps because they're like appliances that are on your kitchen counter. And like when you have an espresso machine, you like put in the pod and you close it and you press a button. And that's all the customization you get. You can't grind the beans to a different level. You can't specify anything else. And so what Val Town is about is bringing that extra level of customizability to more people. Like democratizing programming is like the core mission of the company. So in terms of APIs, this one's a little bit subtle of like why an average everyday person would want an API. Here's a strangely popular one. People really love sharing with the world what they're listening to. I don't entirely get why, but people just love letting people know that this is the song they're listening to on Spotify right now, or here's the song that they most listened to last week. People just like love sharing their music preferences in an ambient way. Like they just listen to music and then they have some system that shares their music history. And a lot of people use Val Town to get that data from Spotify or wherever they listen to music, wherever that data is stored, and then transform it in the ways it might need to be transformed, and then display it somewhere interesting for people. So we've had people display that information on Blue Sky, like they have a Blue Sky account where they'll just tweet out, they'll like in an automated way post that information, or they'll have a little section, a little widget on the top of their website that just shows what song they're listening to. We even had one guy in Boston, he made a great YouTube video of building a digital bumper sticker that shows on the back of his bumper sticker what he's listening to right as he's driving, like right then and there. It's awesome.
So when Dan pitched the idea that, isn't it sad that code on the web doesn't run, right?
Yeah.
What was sad about it to Dan, and what did Dan envision, or you and Dan, as you were chatting, what did you envision that would make you happier?
Yeah. I guess to bring it back to APIs a little bit. So Dan used to work at Dropbox on their API team. And Dan was building the way in which other developers should integrate with Dropbox. And if you ever use any third-party app and Dropbox, that worked through the Dropbox API. And one challenge that Dan had is that some APIs, like parts of the Dropbox API, were very complicated and nuanced and tricky to get right. And so he would write some code to help his customers use this API. And he would send them in an email or whatever, here's the code, just go and run it. And just go and run it is surprisingly difficult. Basically, the thing that made him sad and makes me sad is that when you have code working somewhere, it's surprisingly unportable. It's surprisingly hard to get that same piece of code running on a different machine or by a different person. That's the thing that makes us sad. It's the absence of collaboration, or like how hard collaboration is, because code doesn't just run.
And what is it that makes that collaboration hard? Why is it so hard to port it?
So if you have code running somewhere and you want to get it running somewhere else, the first question is, okay, like what operating system are we talking about? What programming language are we talking about? So you'll have to install the programming language in the right way for the operating system. And then you have to install the right dependencies, like all the packages and libraries that piece of code uses. Then there's environment variables that like might be used, like your OpenAPI key or other like authentication primitives. And then
you realize you're giving me PTSD to when I was banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
And other tools.
Exactly.
I've tried a few, but anyways, keep going.
Yeah.
I'll get
So
there. I'll get there, Steve.
yeah. And then oftentimes you have to set up Git and GitHub. And these things are a pain for professional developers. And then for non-professional people who don't know how to code or just learning like you, they're like total showstoppers. The thing that really gets me is that GitHub repos don't run. Like you have all your source code on GitHub, and presumably it runs on like the machine of whoever built it. And now I, as a programmer, want to make a contribution. Like let's pick an example that I feel like could be motivating. So I feel like a lot of apps on GitHub aren't even built in this way because like nobody, even if you could contribute, it like people wouldn't. But anyways, let's say you're using an app, like you're using Twitter or any app you want, and you want to make a small change. You want the button to be a little bit different. Or you want to fix a bug that exists. I think where most people get stuck is you can't even run the code in order to like get it working to then make a fix to then see what your fix looks like. Like you're stopped before you even get started. Like this ability to run someone else's code is such a fundamental thing. Like even like at my startup, the code base I started, it's a non-trivial task to get our app running on a computer. So it's really hard to contribute if you can't even get something running.
Doing something here, was it more that you had clearly identified the problem, or had you also uncovered a potential way to address it that was compelling?
Val Town is more about a vision of how things could be and less about people having a problem or a particular solution. I think the core North Star for Val Town is like, we just believe that programming should be simpler and easier and more collaborative. One part of our vision that I think is very fraught and nuanced is that we believe programming belongs on the web. From my perspective, the web is one of the best things that ever happened to the world. And I love how all sorts of pro tools that you never thought could exist on the web, like Figma brought kind of Photoshop kind of stuff to the web. And now there's all sorts of video editing tools that are being brought to the web. Like you and I are chatting right now on a live streaming tool that's in the web. To me, it's so wonderful that all these tools are being brought to the web and coding still hasn't been brought to the web. And there are a lot of people who are trying, like Replit, but nobody's succeeded. And that was part of what Dan helped me see, that just because people have tried and failed doesn't mean that it's impossible or will never succeed. Like before Facebook, there was MySpace and Friendster. Before Slack, there was a lot of other chat apps. Just because people are trying and failing, it actually means that there's a huge opportunity here that's very hard to get right.
And did you have a point of view at the time? I'm sure you've learned a lot in the last 2.5 years, but when you were just having that initial discussion, did you two have a point of view about why the ones that had tried were not succeeding and what you would do different that would bring about a different result potentially?
Yeah. My criticism of Replit has been that they're like a jack of all trades, master of none. And whenever I've tried to use Replit, Replit's so amazing for teachers, and Replit's so amazing because they support every programming language. And so whenever I'd want to do something and I want to try out Elixir or Haskell or some random programming language, I'd go to Replit and it would be able to run some stuff, but it wouldn't be able to run any of the packages of that language. They wouldn't have any of the bells and whistles you need to actually be productive. So I think that's kind of speaks to them like having spread their focus. So going in, I was and still am deeply committed to only supporting one ecosystem, the JavaScript TypeScript ecosystem, and doing it to the best of my ability. Even just supporting one ecosystem is incredibly hard. And I guess like the relevant thing to bring up is that what people really want, what my users have been begging for since day one, is they want to be able to edit. They want to be able to use our cloud offerings, but not use the web. They want to be able to use their local desktop editors, which breaks my heart because the whole point is we're trying to bring these things to the web. Like, why do you want to use your desktop tools? But like, I get it. Those desktop tools are really powerful. They've had so many hundreds of years of programming effort put into making them amazing.
And what are some of the desktop tools that you're thinking of when you describe them?
So the obvious one right now that everyone wants to use is Cursor. But before that, it was VS Code. And after Cursor is now this new one, Windsurf. And then there are a lot of AI agentic tools like Klein and Aider, and then Anthropic just released Claude Code, which is a local tool. And then you have old school folks who still want to use Vim and Emacs and Sublime Text. So one of the wonderful things about programming is that it's just text, and so you can bring your own editor and still collaborate with everybody. Programming is like email in that way. Everyone on the team can have a different text editor and all collaborate. That's the good part. The bad news is that nobody wants to leave their favorite tool and go to a new web-based one. But I feel like then the question is, if everyone likes their local tool and nobody wants to go to a web-based one, then why are you trying to make them? And to me, I just put out there that part of why the web is so important is for casual users and for new users. Like someone like you would be like an example of it. Like the web is for I think part of why Figma is so exciting is that a designer can do a whole bunch of stuff in Figma and then send a link, and then boom, I'm in it. I can make comments. I can make little changes, even though I'm not a designer. But if I download a whole app to be able to collaborate with someone who uses Figma, it changes the whole story.
And so, did you start out only enabling web?
Yes, we started out only enabling web, and to today, we only enable web. But literally tomorrow, we're going to have an alpha version that enables local desktop editing with your preferred editor, including Cursor.
And you think the web is better for beginners, but it seems like a lot of the beginners that are talking about using AI to quote unquote code with natural language are using the local tools.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, in some sense, the people who most want to use Cursor are the most beginners to programming.
Huh. But your point of view is that is misguided thinking on their part?
Not necessarily. I guess I have a lot of takes on that, on learning to code with Cursor. I feel like we could put a pin in that for a second. I think there's an audience of people who don't even want to download an app, and that's more who I'm talking about, which I guess maybe what I'm getting at is the distinction that we're elucidating now is the difference between casual use and beginner use. So like a beginner could download Cursor and want to use Cursor without knowing the code. But a casual user who's just not sure if they want to code, but like might want to make a little change, fix a typo, I think for them, the web is important because by definition, a casual user doesn't want to download like a gigabyte app and set it up before they can do anything. Like a casual user needs to be in the web, no download.
So it sounds like one big difference between you and some of the others that you were describing is that you support a more narrow set of tools, but then you support them presumably with a better experience than would be possible if you supported a wide range of tools.
Yeah.
In what ways is it limiting to support a more narrow set?
Every day, people ask us to add Python support, or there are Python tools that we can't support, and we just have to say no. I think that's not actually a problem. It like seems like a problem, but the world is big and you can't serve everyone all at once. It's like nice to have natural limitations to like people you can and can't serve. But yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. I think being able to just support one ecosystem well is key.
So the ecosystem that you've chosen, who is that meant for? Either the kind of person or the kinds of things that these people are building, or however, I guess you segment the customer universe that you're building for.
Yeah, great. And I think I should probably also like maybe at some point, I guess could be now, like just talk about what Val Town is. We've talked about like how it got started, but maybe I should give like a clear definition.
That would be great.
Or a clear description. Yeah. Val Town is a web-based programming platform that lets you ship apps, TypeScript apps, and it has a lot of collaboration features built in. Our target user is a professional programmer who is familiar with JavaScript or TypeScript and has side project energy. And I mean that at work or in their personal lives. I find that it's like it's the same person who's building the Spotify bumper sticker, who's like also building the internal tool at their company that like helps automate some random process or gives extra visibility into something. So we're building this like new way to code, and it's really hard to get people to bet their whole companies on us. I think that would just be that'd be a bad decision, because we're trying to rethink things pretty fundamentally, and we're still too early to bet your company on us. But so because of that, we're targeting apps that you don't care about that much. We're targeting apps. We take uptime and security extremely seriously, but it's still not a big deal if these apps go down or something like that. That's like the use case we're targeting. So that would be like a personal app, like an app for your family, an app for your community, an app for your school. Like teachers can make apps for their students, little quiz apps, or like internal to a company. You can have internal tools, like the sort of things you would make with Retool, like an internal tools dashboard, a scheduling app, like a personal CRM. That's one of my favorite uses. I had a friend who's starting a company, and she built herself a personal CRM that does exactly what she wants with all the keyboard shortcuts she needs. And she built the whole thing on Val Town, the front end, the back end, and a database, all hosted on Val Town. Yeah.
Now, it sounds like I heard you say reimagining programming and not ready to bet the company. What is the desired future state that you're working towards when you are ready for prime time and bet the company? What does that look like? And then how do you get from where you're starting to there, to the extent that you can at least think about high level phases, if you will, since obviously the future is unknown?
Yes. The medium long-term vision.
I lost the sound.
Oh, hello?
That's weird.
You can't hear me now?
Oh, try it now.
How about now?
Yeah, it might have been my headphones. Okay, so I asked you the question and you were about to answer.
Great. All right, so my medium to long-term vision is that people will build the backends, particularly of their apps, on Val Town. They'll build their API server on Val Town. So like in this dream world that we're building for, people would build their front ends on a platform like Vercel or Netlify, or like a more like front end optimized platform, and then they'd build their API server backend on Val Town. And companies like, and then there are some companies that don't even have front ends, like they're API first companies. Like those companies would really fundamentally be Val Town driven companies. And so I guess to make it a little concrete, I don't know if this helps, like the dream for us in a year or two would be like a significant portion of the incoming YC class would be built, or Y Combinator class would be building on Val Town as its like choice of backend technology. Like in the same way that there was a period of time when YC founders would build on Firebase for their database, or they'd build on Supabase for their database. We want people to be choosing Val, or Heroku used to be like the classic place that YC companies would build their backends, or Stripe is a classic place that YC companies build for payments. We want backends of the future to be built on Val Town.
What is assuming you were ready for prime time, what is the built on Val Town pitch? Or let me ask this a different way. What is the built on Val Town experience relative to the current way of building out the back end?
Yeah. So today, when you want to build a back end, and the way that we at Val Town build our back end, because we unfortunately have to do it the old fashioned way, we can't do it on ourselves. The way you build a back end is you use Git and GitHub and Docker, and you get your back end running on everybody's computer who works in your team. And so when a new engineer starts at a company, like for the first day or for the first couple of hours, maybe first couple of days of employment, it's like getting the backend application running on their computer, and then learning how to deploy it from their computer to wherever it is deployed. And like managing that deployment is like a huge thing, and keeping it online and tuning the scaling of it. Should we have one instance of it alive? Should we have two? Should we auto scale it? These sorts of questions. And then when you're a developer and you're trying to make a change, you make a change on your local computer and you test it out. and then you push it to GitHub, and then people have to review it by like pulling the changes to their local computer and then reviewing them on their local computer. There is this notion of preview deploys, which I'll get to in a second. But anyways, that's like the current way, the state of the art. What Val Town is talking about, the vision that we have is that, and this exists for within a company or just without a company. Like this could be in the public. You have a service that's running, and you go to it on Val Town, and that is the source of the code and also the running application. And so anyone who wants to make a change, an employee or just a random drive-by person, if they have access to the code, can click the remix button, and instantly they get a running copy of that application in their own Val Town account. And it runs as soon as they press the button. Some apps might need additional like configuration or authorization or whatever to run, but we will walk you through that. That's like a part of our onboarding. So then once you have this running copy, you make a change and you hit save. And when you hit save, we don't just save the code, we deploy the saved version of that code to our cloud for your version. So then you keep developing in a cloud deployment. There's no deploying on your local computer and then getting it somewhere else. It's already deployed. And then when you're done and you're ready to contribute your changes, like, all right, I want to suggest these changes upstream, send a pull request. You hit a button, you open a pull request, and the person gets notified, and then they can explore your app, like your live app. They don't have to like pull the changes and get your changes working on their local machine. It's already working in this like preview deployed environment.
I'm going to try an analogy here, and keep in mind, I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's like my caveat for the whole discussion. But just based on what I'm hearing, it sounds almost like it's Google Docs for production code.
Yes.
That's right?
That's great. That's a very simple way of describing it. Yes. I can flesh it out a tiny bit for you. Like the way that I today communicate with my lawyers is I tell them what I need. They send me a Word document. I send that back. I send that Word document to who I'm negotiating with. They send changes back to me. I forward those changes onto my lawyers. The lawyer sends me back another document. It's just insane. And it's like, why can't we all just get in a Google Doc and just collaborate in line? And that's what Val Town is for programming. Like programming in today's day and age is still a little bit point to point, and we want to get it centralized on one platform. So the reason the places where that analogy doesn't fit is that programmers already have the Google Docs for programming, and that's what GitHub is. And a big part of what we're doing is improving on the collaboration that GitHub provides, because we're bringing runnability to it.
Can I double click on that? What collaboration does GitHub provide? And then what specifically are you guys providing that is new and different?
Yeah. GitHub is amazing. We use it. GitHub lets you have all sorts of branches of code. So everyone can have different copies. GitHub is a lot like Google Docs for code, but it's like much more structured. And the reason it needs to be more structured is because in a Google Doc, if you and I are editing simultaneously, the worst thing that can happen is one of us has a typo or something like that. But in programming, if two people are editing simultaneously and we stomp on each other's feet, like the whole application could break. Like programming is a lot less forgiving. A Google Doc is forgiving because the consumer of a Google Doc is a human who can just see what's happening and interpret the results. But imagine if when you were writing a Google Doc, if there was any typo at any point in time, like the whole thing was unreadable. That's more what programming is about. Anyways, so GitHub is like Google Docs for programming, but it's a lot more structured. And really people like make branches and make their changes, and they can send them back upstream. So that's what GitHub provides.
Now, one interesting observation that I'm having is that we're 42 minutes into talking about Val Town, and we haven't once talked about a natural language for code. We're talking about version control and runnability. Where does AI fit into all of this, if at all? And I guess I know it does, but yeah, how and why, and does it need to?
Yes, great question. AI was like never part of the vision of Val Town, but it's such a wonderful piece of technology that, you know, I feel like everyone should be asking themselves all the time how, like, what form of constraints are no longer constraints. You know, how can we use this magical thing? And with coding, it's very obvious because it's being used in so many ways already. And like my users are asking me for AI coding features, and they've been asking for AI coding features since day one. And I guess the structure of my answer to your question is to give you, in my mind, to give you a tour of the blog posts that we as a company have written over the course of the company about AI. Because like we've started adding AI features since 2 years ago, and we just have kept going. And my most recent blog post about AI was about how the history of Val Town and AI is just fast following or copying what other people are doing. And it comes from a place of, we're building a platform for programming. Our users are also programming other places, and they want features like AI features from those places in our tool. And so we build them, and then we get feedback on them. Some of them work and we keep them. Some of them don't work and we don't keep them. And that's been working pretty well for us. But just now, just in the last month or two, we've shifted our strategy quite drastically. And I'm in the middle of writing that blog post right now, so I can tell you about it. But I just want to pause first to make sure that you don't want me to, I can go in a couple different directions.
Now I feel like we have to know what the strategy shift is.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, the old strategy was to copy AI features into our product. And I'll just give a couple examples of that, and then I'll talk about the strategy shift. So the first thing we copied into our product was GitHub Copilot completions. As you're typing, it'll suggest things to type after your cursor, and you can just hit tab to accept them. So we built that in our product. That's been very successful as it remains today. The other main successful thing we've built is what you used when I got you to try Val Town. It's called Townie. It's our AI agent, and it's analogous to Replic's agent. If your listeners know about Cursor or Bolt, or sorry, not Cursor. If your users know about Bolt or Lovable, Townie is like those. Or if your users know about Claude artifacts, that's what Townie was really based off of, Claude artifacts. So on the left, you have a chat with an LLM, and on the right, you have the outputted code and preview of the code. And so we built this interface into Val Town that you tell it what kind of website you want, what kind of API you want, what kind of database you want, and it will write the code for you. And importantly, we've taught it a lot about our system. And so it like knows how to write code for our system. It knows how to detect errors in our system and automatically solve those errors. It's a very cool tool. But we've decided that this strategy of fast following is expensive, and we're always going to be like a click behind. And the industry is like moving too fast. And when you think about like how fast things are moving, I can just give a couple reference points that a friend gave me. He said that it seems like the cost of inference is dropping 100x every year for the same level of intelligence. And if you just look at one level of intelligence, if you look at GPT-4 level of intelligence, which launched like a year and a half, 2 years ago, in 18 months, that level of intelligence went from being frontier and very expensive to now it dropped 1,000x. In 18 months, it dropped 1,000x the price for that level of intelligence. And for contrast, Moore's law is a 2x increase in chips on a transistor in 18 months. And Moore's law has been this like tidal wave of benefits that our whole industry is based off of. Like all of Silicon Valley and all the growth is from Moore's law. And like the current growth of LLMs, like not only their improvements in reasoning, but like the cost reduction. For my team of 6 people and a startup, we can't build the core Val Town platform and then also keep up with AI, particularly in AI code generation, because I don't know if you've noticed, but AI code generation seems to be like the single hottest like market for startups and venture capitalists. Like, I don't know if you see Cursor keep raising money at crazy valuations, but their competitors are also doing the same. We decided to bow out of that race and instead focus on staying in our lane and focus on interoperability and openness. there's a blog post that was very influential to me by Matthias, the founder of Netlify. His blog post is called, I think it's called AX, Agentic Experience. And the thesis of that blog post is that people who made developer tools used to focus on DX, or developer experience, which was a radical idea at the time. But now that we have agents, and agents are customers of developer tools, we need to focus on the experience that we're designing for agents themselves and building a really good agentic experience. And that's more the direction we're going in. Here, I'll pause there, but I can keep going if you want.
I guess my question is, so does that mean that instead of picking off features to fast follow, you will just try to integrate with the leaders?
Directionally, yes. Right now, we're not focused on integrating with them. We're focused on building the interfaces, the APIs, for them to integrate with us. Or just, we're focused on building the interfaces for our system to just be integratable with anybody. We're just like opening ourselves up to integration. Yeah, does that? So I can give an example that's been very successful for Netlify, for example. So there's a company called Bolt, which is basically a clone of Townie. So like we built Townie in July, August, and then Bolt launched a couple months later, and it does a lot of the same things, but they don't do deployment. That's our main thing is deployment. Their main thing is helping you build apps with AI. And so when you're ready to deploy, you hit a deploy button, and then they say, great, we're going to go deploy your code that you made with us to Netlify. And so Netlify didn't build that partnership. Netlify just has this API that allows people to send code to and have it be deployed. And what's important about this API is that it's an unauthenticated API. So anyone can go to Netlify and say, hey, go deploy this code for me, but I'm not going to tell you who owns this code. Just deploy it secretly, give me a URL to that deployment, and then I'm going to give that URL to my user, and my user can then go and see the deployed code and then optionally claim it. And when they hit the claim button, it'll walk them through setting up a Netlify account and then adding that project to their Netlify account. And so that infrastructure of doing unauthenticated deploys that users can then later claim, that's really cool. Like it allows Netlify to focus on being a great deployment platform, and it lets a Bolt focus on being a great coding building platform, and then they can integrate there. So that's more the approach that we're taking.
Got it. So the actual backend and API development, will that take place within the walls of Val Town, or will that take place in these other tools?
Yeah, the short answer is both. We still really believe in our web editor, and we think there's a lot of users who want that in a lot of contexts. And then we also now support you to like push to Val Town from Cursor. And we as a team are actually excited to play with this tomorrow. We're having a user space Friday where we tomorrow, none of us are allowed to like work on the product. We have to, and the plan is for us to use our new open tools to develop with Cursor and Windsurf locally and then push to Val Town.
Nice. Annette, how big is your team?
There's 6 of us here in New York.
Okay. And in these early phases, since it sounds like what you're trying to do is so different, and that, like you said, it's different enough that no one's gonna lock you in and give you the keys to the kingdom. You're picking off stuff on the periphery to prove yourselves, and then it's land and expand. What then becomes important in this phase in terms of the milestones that you and that the team are driving towards?
For better or for worse, we hold ourselves accountable to like weekly growth metrics, which
Growth of what?
like growth of active users. We count an active user as a user who had code that ran in a given week. Even if you didn't log into Val Town, but your code is running, and we're presuming it's doing like some benefit for you. Your website's running, your agents are running in the background. So yeah, so that's the main. And then we also keep our eye on revenue. We have a free tier and we have a paid tier, and the paid tier gives you custom domains and other bells and whistles that we can't give everyone in the free tier. So we do hold ourselves accountable to like weekly growth rates. And we're targeting like the classic YC growth rates of 5 to 7%, which many weeks we hit, many weeks we don't hit. So even though we're like still figuring things out and iterating so much, we think a lot about growth every day. And like, how is what we're going to do now going to lead to growth in the short term?
And are you more focused in the short term on individuals or on companies? Because I heard you talk about the examples of companies picking off their non-critical
Yeah.
applications, but then it also sounded like it's a lot of newcomers who might find the most value, who might even be doing this as side projects like the personal CRM. So does it matter who when you think about growth?
Yeah, good question. The personal CRM was actually in a company context for that one in particular. But if I could pick in the abstract, I would pick the biggest companies possible, using the biggest internal tools possible, if all else was equal. If I have two users asking for help and one is working, on a little side project and one is working on a critical company thing, I'm going to help the person with the company thing first. That's because they can pay us. They have no problem paying us, and they have no problem paying us more if their usage scales up over time. And in the interest of sustainability, I feel obligated to serve the business user first. And that's in the short term. In the longer term, and just in reality, it's so much more muddy than that. A lot of our best business users come from having been side project users. Like I think a lot of the best programmers do both. They like do side projects on the side, and then they do side projects at work. And so there's not as sharp a distinction between business use cases and work use cases. I'm trying to think if I can come up with a good example of this. But there's a guy, I don't know if I should give his name, but he was using us for all sorts of passion tools, and then he gets hired by a company who don't know anything about servers. And he's great. You guys don't know about servers, but I do. I'm going to make it on Val Town. And he got to choose that technology decision. And he had like already vetted us because he'd made like dozens of personal sites on us. So that's the up growth we're thinking about.
How are you growing? Do you have a sales force, or what is the strategy in terms of how people learn about Val Town?
Yeah, we definitely don't have a sales force, or if we do, it's me and I'm not very good at it. Val Town is very much like a bottoms up motion. People find out about us on Twitter or other social networks from me or from like people sharing stuff that they've made. That's like the primary way. And a lot of referrals, like a lot of people when they sign up say that they just heard about us from their friend, their cousin, their work colleague. We're all about collaboration. We don't even have the ability to add a collaborator to a project. Like right now, if you want to collaborate with me, you can remix my project and then send your changes upstream, which is just a couple button clicks, but 3 button clicks. But people really want proper collaborators. This is a trusted person and they can make a change directly. Like they don't need my approval. And that's what a team is about. And once we have that, so not only is it going to let teams use us, but I think it'll really drive people to invite their work colleagues to a project, invite their friends to a side project. And I'm excited about that driving growth too.
And don't answer anything that you don't want to answer, but I think I read that you raised a couple rounds of funding, and so you raised a smaller round, and then more recently, call it in the last 12 months or so, you raised a meaningfully larger round. First, did I get that right? And second, what was the story in that larger round that gave you and investors confidence that it was time to resource up and presumably start to deploy that bigger war chest of capital as well?
I would categorize it actually quite differently than that. We raised our funding in 2 rounds, pre-seed and a seed, but they were both led by the investor I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, Dan Levine at Excel. He invested all that capital, $6.5 million, and then we raised $500K from angels. And the plan has been from the beginning to get like the minimum viable team of 5 to 10 people and not grow the team, but just grind out to product market fit. And we think of like Notion or maybe Instagram as like role models in that sense of a small team under 10 people with an outsized impact, with an outsized user base. And the key is to just extend runway and keep complexity small by having a small team, so that we just give ourselves the time and space to figure out what it is we're building and who we're building it for. So we're not trying to scale up or deploy capital in a big way.
So it wasn't a product market fit story. It was we're still excited about the long-term vision here. And we also think that this initial experimentation is fruitful. And while we don't have all the answers yet, all we want to do is keep grinding, and we want to have a long time to grind without worrying about running out of cash. So it's not to go and grow. It's to give ourselves the time that takes our head out of a vice so that we can experiment, learn, and tune until we get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's smart. Yeah, and it's nice that you have an investor partner who's aligned with that. And alignment is so key, because otherwise you get the money and I don't get it. Why did you even raise from us? Because now that you have it, you're not using it. If you weren't ready to use it, why'd you raise it? And that's the last thing that you guys need if you're in the mode that it sounds like you're in.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And what does the future look like? Tune until you've tuned enough, and you don't know when. You'll know when you know, but you don't know when it's coming. But I guess, what's the strategy between now and then? Once you do feel like you've got a recipe, then what happens?
Yeah, we're growing pretty well now. Like, our weekly growth rate is still 1, 2, 5. Last month we had a couple weeks where it was like 15%, 18% growth in a week. So like, our growth rate is still good, even though we haven't figured it, even though we're changing and iterating so much. Like, we're like, I was onboarding a friend to Val Town by hand, which I do to get feedback. And he was like, this is crazy. Like, your onboarding is terrible. Like, how is this company growing at all? And the reason onboarding is terrible is because the product's changing so much that we can't build onboarding, because like the product changes so much from week to week. But anyways, hopefully at some point we'll get it all dialed in and we'll be able to grow in a more predictable way, because we'll have a more predictable sense of what the thing is. The thing that I'm most excited about in the short term is, and I'm sure you'll see this on Twitter in the next week or two, is me being on Twitter showing people how to use Val Town and their local favorite AI tool. If you're programming in Cursor, here's how to use Cursor in Val Town. I think that's gonna be a really fun demo. Like, I'll be able to build some really complicated things in 5 minutes.
So I'd love to switch gears. There's a couple of other topics I want to make sure that we hit on, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one is Val Town is for programmers. You self-identify as a programming guy. I gave you a few different choices, and programming that was like your North Star of your zone of excellence and delight. There's a lot of tools coming on the market that have the stated promise that will be writing code on the behalf of programmers and non-programmers, and that increasingly the barrier is lowering for who can become a programmer. Where do you think that future lies? And I'll ask the same question: the short-term, medium, and the long-term. Should anyone that wants to build technical products still learn to code? Or do you think that these tools will democratize it enough that becomes less important over time?
It's a great question. I was thinking a lot about this question right before our interview, because I knew you'd ask it. Just before this interview, my dad called and he was like, someone just told me that in 6 months, AI will write 90% of the code.
Oh, yeah. No, that's what I think the Anthropic CEO said that this week, and it was making all the headlines. And someone actually took that tweet and took a screenshot of Anthropic's job openings, and it had 50 engineering roles. And it was like, oh, so these are like 3 to 6 month roles?
Yeah, that is a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. I think that where I'll start is that I think the future of programming, of fully and autonomous programming done by AI, it's like the future of driving cars. And for as long as I've been alive, like, we knew that like cars would one day drive themselves. We just didn't know when. And if I can just describe this, my co-founder Tom has this wonderful visualization he made that he calls like the self-driving rainbow. And it shows when people boldly predicted self-driving cars would be accomplished by, and when the prediction was made. And so it's like in 2015, Elon Musk said that by 2020, all Teslas would drive themselves. And so like, it has this like rainbow effect of like people making predictions and the predictions failing to come true. And people just keep making these predictions and they keep failing to come true.
That are listening to this, I'm sure there's some, and they're all going to say, that sounds like fusion. So,
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of ways, like these things maybe all boil down to AGI and like when will machines like finally cross this hard to define threshold that like they're as smart as humans? Because what seems like has happened with self-driving cars is that you can get really freaking close, but then there's this like tiny little bit of like human judgment left where like the AI just can't figure out the context of, I don't know if you've seen recently when the AI, when it's two Waymos like stuck in a traffic jam and like they can't get around each other. And it's, oh, clearly this is not a human. A human would be like, oh, okay, that's another Waymo like me. We need to communicate somehow. Let me just inch to this. A human would be able to solve
I
this
know how
problem. but a
Boston
Waymo-
drivers would do it. It probably wouldn't be in a very nice way, but they do have a way of communicating.
Yes. Like the long tail, getting a self-driving car to work is getting it to work in all these contexts where ultimately you have to be a human with human judgment to understand a bunch of stuff. It's not just like staying between these lines. That's easy. Like the hard part is like all the human complexity. And I think the same necessarily has to be true for programming. The AI can get only so good until they have to make a decision or understand a long GitHub issues thread. And oh, like when that programmer said this, like he's actually like being sarcastic. There's just like complicated human factors, and we'll only fully automate AI once like AI like truly is as smart as a person. And like whether that's this year or 30 years from now, literally nobody knows. So anyways, that's my non-answer to your question. Like we just don't know when humans, like when AI will reach that threshold.
So if I want real tools to be built internally that can automate mundane parts of my job as well as gain insights from this aggregate body
Yes.
of content and have that be living and breathing content and
Yeah,
so on
yes.
and so forth, do I either need to learn to code or find a technical partner?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think in the short term, it's such an interesting question of like, how do you become dangerous with these tools? How do you become useful with these tools? And what do you learn? What is it that you should learn and why? And what's the half-life of your learning? Because there's certain things that I feel like aren't useful to learn, like how to program HTML and CSS. Like most of that, AI is like pretty great at it. Like you shouldn't learn it anymore. Like you just describe to the AI how you want things to be changed. Mostly, but it can like still get stuck sometimes. So I'm teaching my brother to code, and he uses AI and he gets a lot of stuff done, but then the AI gets stuck and he can't get the AI unstuck. And he and I are really grappling with, are the ways that AI gets stuck today fundamental things that he should learn? Or if we just wait 2 months for the next AI release, will AI just not get stuck on those things anymore? And then like, why did he spend 2 months learning them?
How do I sign up for this course?
Yeah, it's not a course. It's just he and I meet once a week, and I give him feedback on what he's building, and we talk about how he got stuck and how I get him unstuck for next week, and he goes off and does it again.
That's what I want. Someone should build like it's like pair programming for non-technical people trying to learn. Like a lot of these courses, like it's like people tell me like, oh, just sit down with ChatGPT and that will be your pair programmer. And it's like, I'm more high maintenance than that. Like I need a human to pat me on the back and tell me it'll be okay.
Well,
I think that's the primary role of the human. I'm not sure
Yeah.
that I need them for
Yeah.
more than that, but I seem to need that person.
if you recall, I offered exactly this to you.
I might be back. I'm still thinking about it. It's just, am I spending any time on it? No. Why? Because I'm in my zone of excellence and delight, which is having discussions like this all day long, and I'm learning a ton and having a blast. But yeah, it's on my to-do list as well. I'm a one-man show, and it's like chicken and egg. I'm too busy doing mundane tasks to make the time to learn, but until I make the time to learn, then I can't automate any of the mundane tasks, right? Man. And I know a lot of people feel that, a lot of companies feel that, a lot of founders feel that. I have my core business to run. I'm sure it could run more efficiently. I'm terrified of getting left behind by a newcomer that doesn't have the baggage of a core business that exists like I do. But at the same time, my team's already overwhelmed. I can't pull them off just to go play with AI tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it for sure. I feel the same way. Even I feel like I can't keep up with all the changes. Like I was saying, 100x improvement in cost alone every year. It feels like my fiance likes to joke that literally every day I say, it's just me and my phone being like, a new model just dropped. Like I do that and she just laughs. It's every day.
I have one more for you. And you said something earlier in this conversation that got me interested, which was that by putting it on the web, it could be a more social and collaborative pursuit and removing the barriers to that being. If you recall, with MCJ in the early days, we had people that were binging on the pod and they were sitting in interesting spots and really diverse backgrounds and longing for a peer group to untangle the nuanced topics that we were covering on the show. And so our tool of choice to foster that collaboration was the Slack room. Now, I'm meeting with a bunch of interesting founders day in and day out. Many of those discussions are getting recorded on the show. And then many of those guests then go on to be listeners, or in your case, I know you've listened to a few episodes before you became a guest, right? And so there's a lot of overlap. And pretty much everybody that I've met with so far, maybe you'll be the first to be like, not me, but the vast majority of the people I've been meeting with so far, they say it's moving so fast, I'm having a hard time keeping up. I also have a day job and all these things that need to get done. So I have a day job doing the work and I have a night job staying on top of all the changes. And anyone on my team who is going to be an impactful player needs to have that split personality where they're spending part of their time doing and part of their time keeping up with how quickly the landscape is changing. They all say they would benefit from a peer group and collaboration, as well as maybe even Lego blocks, clumps of code, or right. And of course, everyone's worried about competition, because I also have people say, gosh, I can't really talk about this one thing on the show because I don't know how much of a mode it'll be in the long term, but it's a mode for now. And I don't want my competitors to know about it. And there's a lot of them, right? So there's some kind of guard up about sharing, but at the same time, that same person would be really eager to benefit from the learnings from anyone else's companies, the same way that their competitors would be eager to learn from them. And so I guess my question is, I feel like I've got a lane where as my relationships grow, I could potentially provide some layer of collaboration. And that could be part human collaboration and part more open source style, like sharing of the clumps of code. And Slack and Discord, I don't know your thought, but just setting up a Slack or Discord feels, one, it just feels a little tired. It's, I don't know, the last thing I want now is like another Slack channel. But then two, for this type of problem where it's so hands-on, it just feels like maybe that convening could look different. And I don't even know if it is community. It's just somehow fostering knowledge sharing and resource sharing potentially across this growing tribe of peoples. I wanted to put all that out there for you and just see how you react to it and what ideas you might have. One, would it be interesting? And two, what would you do? Where would you start? What should I build?
Good. Yeah, great questions. I feel similar to you, and like we've discussed, we're similar in that we interview people publicly when we're confused. So like the first thing that comes to mind for me is that I have a couple of friends who are like real AI experts on the cutting edge. And whenever I do live streams with them or watch them use their AI tools, I learn so much. And so, yeah, my instinct to solve this problem is to do exactly what you're doing, but do it on my live stream or my podcast. And I've been doing that. So I think you're doing the right thing.
No, I am for me, but what about all these people that are booked and that don't have all day every day to sort through it like I am, but who still are longing for more of that connect? They're on very heads down, lonely pursuits, right? And they want it to be more collaborative. But a lot of the historical definitions of community sound good in theory, but then in practice, it's like they try it for a few weeks and then either it's a ghost town or it's too noisy and they need to go because they can't get anything done and focus.
Yeah, it's a hard problem. I don't know how to solve that one.
Okay. I'll come back to you if I come up with anything to get feedback. Let's see. Over the next 12, 18 months, what are the key goals with Val Town and what does success look like?
Yeah. The key goals is to grow 5% per week. So if you do that for a year, that's about 10x growth. If you talk to me in a year or so and I have 10 or 100 times users, then I'll be a pretty happy guy. Because to me, what that means is that we're like really democratizing programming. We're really enabling the collaboration in a new way. So that'll be quite exciting in terms of outcome. And in terms of things we're building, oh man, we're building so many cool things. Yeah, the current thing is this openness piece of letting people push to us from other places. And so like a true success there would be other tools are integrating with us. So like other tools that I didn't build are letting people build AI experiences and then deploy those to Val Town. That would be pretty wild. And then we have a whole bunch of improvements to our infrastructure, but those are exciting to me, but I think they're probably boring to you and your listeners.
For any listeners that want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you, and what kinds of people might you want to hear from, if any?
Yeah, I love hearing from people. I'm Steve at val.town for email. Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at val.town, T-O-W-N. And val.town is the website that I am making. So if any of these ideas intrigued you and you want to get started writing and deploying code in a collaborative environment, I'd recommend heading over to Val Town. I mentioned a bunch of blog posts. Those are on blog.val.town. My personal website is stevekrause.com. Who do I want to hear from? I mostly want to hear from people making cool stuff, even if it's not in Val Town. I really love side project-y people who are building all sorts of fun hacks in their companies and in their personal lives, like building software. There's this new phrase, personal software. It's actually a very old phrase, personal software, personal computing, but it's become new again. And whether you're using AI to do it or Val Town to do it, I love people building those sorts of things. And yeah, I love nice emails. So please reach out.
Anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
Let's see. I have a note here. Let me take a look. See anything? No. You asked all things I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Great. This was a blast, Steve. Thanks a lot for coming on. I feel like I learned a lot. I just got private tutored on DevTools for an hour, a little over an hour. But yeah, wishing you guys best of luck. And as I gear up to get my hands dirty again, which I will, you will hear from me again. And
yes.
Yeah, looking forward to keeping an ongoing dialogue and to watching you achieve your vision.
Yes, you too. I will be your tutor when you're ready. Your AI coding tutor.
On camera. I have proof. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to The Next. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player. In addition to the podcast, which typically publishes weekly, there's also a weekly newsletter on Substack at thenextnext.substack.com. That's essentially for weekly accountability of the ground I'm covering, areas I'm tackling next, and where I could use some help as well. And it's a great area to foster discussion and dialogue around the topics that we cover on the show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.